Hey folks, we're going to go to a question that was submitted on LinkedIn. So just wanted to remind you before I dive into this one, it's a long one which is really good. So if you want questions answered, leave them in the comments, or if you want to send something that's long like this, be kept anonymous, reach out to Dev Leader on social media, or just reach out to Nick Cosentino on LinkedIn. My profile should be open to send messages. We're going to go through a bit of background from this person's experience, kind of what they're going through, and I'll give my perspective. Of course, like, yes, I am an engineering manager. Yes, I have been doing this for over 12 years. No, I'm not going to be telling people what they should do. So this is not like, I don't know, not like prescribing advice here, but this is just my perspective and opinion. So the other thing is this person did send in their resume. So I am trying to do a resume review series on my main Dev Leader YouTube channel. It's not yet made like subscription only. So it's not like members only or like paywalled or anything like that. So send in resumes if you got them. I'll try to get them scheduled in. And then, yeah, you can watch the Dev Leader YouTube channel. You'll see when you watch the resume videos how to send them in and then go from there. So let's dive into it. Okay, so this person is pretty young, but they are working as a full stack developer. And sort of the scenario that might be interesting is that they're saying that they're working at an outstaffing company. It's been about 2 years. So, been able to work on several projects, different tech stacks, and things like that. So, different technologies. Um, and then they're starting to feel undervalued and underpaid. So getting that kind of thing creeping in over roughly half a year or so. So from my experience, it's kind of interesting. Like sometimes this starts to creep in, and you're like, you start to realize it. For some people, it might be very obvious, and they're like, I feel like I'm getting screwed over. But I think for other people, for myself, I've had this kind of thing creep in my career where it's like, hey, like I'm starting to feel a particular way, and it's interesting because for me at least, it starts like becoming like it creeps in more and more, like it keeps building. So I suspect that's what's happening to this individual. So they joined either, yeah, when they're finishing university, so they're fresh. So basically, it sounds like it's like their first kind of job outside of school, um, and they get to support a really large project, which is great. And as I mentioned, some certifications, and I think I just wanted to mention for me that's not like a huge deal. I think if you have certifications, if they're specific certifications for being able to work for, I think what they're doing is like almost like a little bit of contract work, and or the company is set up such that it's almost like contract work for customers. So if there's certifications that are required to do like to work for certain customers or that kind of thing, then sure, I think that can be good. But otherwise, like my personal opinion is if you find that being motivated to do the learning alongside a certification is helpful, then I think it's great. Otherwise, like only if you really need it for work. Um, okay, and then they're saying, given their achievements, they want more responsibility, right? So, um, he's saying that like it kind of seems like when he's looking around where he's working, like it's pretty common that most people like it kind of seems like they're stagnating in terms of being able to progress in their career. He said not all, some are kind of like exceeding, but it kind of seems like the common theme is that there starts to be some stagnation. Um, and then also, yeah, they're like a lot of those individuals. He's just kind of addressing like families. They're not really focused on improving their skills. So this person's pretty young and early in their career, right? So it sounds like they've been able to build up some experience, and they're trying to ride some of that momentum. And it's kind of feeling like where is this going? Like it kind of seems like hitting a bit of a wall. And those around them may have like excuses or their own sort of reasons for not trying to push and grow as sort of with as much interest as this person has. So he's starting to feel uncomfortable, is what he's saying, and feels like kind of reaching this point where, like, is there another company that I could be showcasing my skills and abilities? Like, it doesn't feel like he's able to at this place, which I think is really interesting. Again, I have found myself in situations at different points in my career where I felt like that. Like, am I really operating at my full potential? Or am I kind of just like doing the things that have to get done? And like, I feel like there's more in me. So I have felt like that. Um, Started sharing these thoughts with colleagues, seeking advice, but they don't offer concrete suggestions or change. Instead, they just agree, saying, "Yep, we completely understand you. You have to move forward." Well, seems like they're offering some suggestions. Okay, so trying to talk through, and I think this is important. And if you're, as I'm talking through this, if you're like, hey, I'm kind of feeling like maybe I'm in a similar situation, I think this next part is a good reflection. So this person is addressing or reflecting on the things that make them unhappy. So I can't fully perform as I'd like on my current project because um, customer doesn't allow access to their infrastructure and only accepts planned tasks to be completed. So kind of like maybe not as much autonomy based on the type of work they're doing. So I think for me, autonomy is a big thing. That's kind of what I get from their point here. And then management does not provide any growth opportunities, no performance reviews, no communication with a customer that they're working within. Because, so again, this interesting working relationship, right, where they're kind of like they belong to a company, but then the customer that they go work inside of, there's also no like mentorship or sort of coaching or performance kind of feedback. So it's almost like the worst of both worlds. Like it seems like they're not getting performance reviews from their direct manager. And then I don't think I would expect a client to do this kind of thing, but maybe based on the working relationship, we have this kind of thing that we might call like a dotted line report where it's someone like they might not be the person that promotes you or is directly responsible, but they can still kind of like give you some mentorship and it's like career kind of focused kind of conversations. But um, and then so I think this person is kind of like I'm looking for a path forward, but they had a couple of questions I'm going to read out. Am I doing something wrong? Am I misunderstanding something? So we'll talk about that. Why don't outstaffing and maybe other companies invest resources in their junior specialists? Good question. Is it true that outstaffing companies generally have little to offer growing developers who want to advance? I'll be transparent, I don't have a ton of experience on this. I have some thoughts, but it would be totally unfair for me to try and speak about this particular thing from the perspective of outstaffing as an authority. So I want to be very transparent about that because I think that's important if I'm going to be sharing my perspective. Um, if I want to look for a new job, is it a good idea to aim for product company or startup as a junior to mid level? Full stack developer, or any other advice on where to look. So maybe let's go through these. Am I doing something wrong slash am I misunderstanding something? I don't, it's hard to know. I'll say that. My suspicion is that on the surface, probably not. But again, it's hard to know. So instead of maybe trying to answer the question, are you doing something wrong or misunderstanding? Maybe let's talk about like kind of what I think is happening, and then maybe some things that if you're interested in staying, like what at least some next steps. So yeah, because like to answer this in like a helpful way, like I don't actually know if I can answer those two questions. Like, right, are you doing something wrong? Maybe. I don't really think so, but maybe. Are you misunderstanding something? Probably. But like that's not it's just not helpful, I don't think. So um I think the first thing that you are definitely doing right is having this reflection. And this is why like for other people watching this, I'm trying to encourage like I've talked about this in other videos, but I think I think it's important that you find it's might sound cheesy, but I think you need to find that you're happy where you're working. And I can understand that not every project or not every day is going to be awesome. I'm talking about how this period for me right now, like I'm burnt the hell out. But that doesn't mean that like I look at my current role and I'm like, well, I hate this. This is the worst. This is a dumb team, a dumb company. Like nothing. It's not like that. And even the project that I'm on, I'm not like this is the dumbest project or something. It's just like I understand sort of the scenario and what's kind of putting me through this. So not every day is going to be awesome, but I think it's important that you are finding opportunities for yourself where you are trying to maximize that. And it does exist. So that's why I said I know it sounds cheesy to say, but it does exist. Where I used to work, I had a lot of autonomy. I was in a position where I was having a really big impact, not only in the work I was doing, but like the mission of the company. And I could wake up every day and be like, this is awesome. Right. So these opportunities do exist. I'm not saying that everyone ends up finding it, but I think it's important because your career is a large part of your life, trying to work towards finding that. And it may take you a while to really understand like what things like get you energized, get you engaged, because it could be about how you carry out your work. It could be the mission that you're trying to get behind, right? So when I talk about mission, where I used to work, we were building digital forensic software. And it's like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Like, sounds kind of fancy. It's kind of interesting. And it was, but like what's even more cool in my opinion is like the impact that it was having. And it's not just like, oh, great, you're selling software to like police officers and stuff. It's like, no, it was really impactful because we were helping save children, right? So for me, that's like that means something. And that's like something that I can get behind. Now, not every job is going to be like that kind of mission, but I think it's important that you try to find something you like. So being able to do what this person's doing and have that reflection, even if they're kind of in this phase of like, I don't know exactly what I want, but I know this doesn't feel right. I think that's important. Um, I think one thing, like maybe an action to try, because it's not really called out here, I don't think, unless I glossed over it, but like you're saying there's no performance reviews and it sounds like there's not a lot of focus on like career conversations. What does your manager say? Right? Like what one thing I don't know from reading this is like what have the conversations with your manager looked like when you've brought this up? When you've shared the feedback with them, hey, like I am trying to make sure that I can grow in my career. I want to be able to have career conversations. I want the feedback. What does that look like? Because if it hasn't happened, I think that's step one. If you're trying and saying like, "Hey, this is what I would like," or something in this direction to help me grow, and then you're not getting that support, I think you have your answer, right? But I think you need to at least try. I know that if I were to think about like characteristics of a good manager or what do good managers do, I would say they probably should be having conversations with you regularly about career progression, right? The cadence will look different for different people, but you should have clear expectations from your manager on that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I can't sit here and say, so just assume it's going to happen because guess what? It ain't always going to happen. So I think that the best advice I can give there is like, just remember that the person that cares the most about your career is you. So I got something. Oh no, my head's just shiny. I thought there was like a big white fluff on my head because we got dogs and cats, and I thought, how embarrassing would that be to do this whole video with something? I've done that with a YouTube video, and I had like fluff in my beard. Don't do that. So yeah, what is that like? What are those conversations looking like with your manager? Because if they're not, do it. And then the other thing is if you're saying like, hey, like I'd like some feedback. Hey, like some feedback. If they're struggling to give you anything useful, try to ask more specifically for feedback, not just, hey, can I have some feedback on how I'm doing? Say, hey, there was this interaction with the customer or on this particular project, like this piece that we delivered. Like, what did you think about my interaction in that meeting with the customer or leading that design? Like, try to have more targeted sort of questions about feedback. And that way, number one, you can kind of guide like where you want feedback. And number two, you're more likely to get something that's useful. Because if your manager's already kind of like, being a little soft on the feedback part, like just being able to give them that little nudge in the direction of like, I'm looking for feedback on this. Like, what are your thoughts? That'll help. So overall, I think that if you're feeling this way and you're not feeling supported, like making it known that this is an expectation you have. So I think that's important. Next part, like why don't outstaffing, maybe other companies invest resources in their junior specialists? So again, I can't comment on the outsourcing stuff. There is a person, if you want to go look on LinkedIn, I can't remember his podcast. His name's Matt Watson. Matt Watson runs sort of like a dev agency like this. Uh, I'm gonna forget the name. This is the problem with live streaming stuff. Um, and the only thing that's coming to mind is full stack. It's I think it's full scale. Anyway, Matt Watson, check him out on LinkedIn. I think Full Scale is the name of his company, but that's what he does. So he would have lots of different perspectives on this, but I don't think like I think Matt Watson is an awesome guy, and I don't know how he runs his company, but I don't imagine that he has this kind of perspective. I think it would be quite the opposite. So my point here is that I think that the observation is that this is a company that seems like they're not investing in their people in general. And that's kind of like, that's crappy. So I don't know if it's specific to outstaffing. Maybe just to kind of, you know, I try to think through this. Like, again, I don't have experience with outstaffing. So maybe the idea is that they're looking at it like more, what's a good way to put this? More like resources, right? Like more like numbers on a sheet because they're like, hey, um, we're billing clients and you're getting X developers and here's the project scope and like people more easily become numbers on a spreadsheet. I'm I'm speculating maybe that's how this company ends up doing it. Again, I'm not saying all like companies that operate like this would do that, but maybe that's why, right? I'm just kind of going out on a limb here. And that would still be like a shit way to look at it because if even if you were like, hey, like it's all about just like cost savings and how to like minimize all of that. Okay, well, you realize if you make your people better, then they can become more efficient. Like, so seems kind of weird. But again, I think that companies can fall into this trap, and I don't. It's hard for me to say because I don't feel like I have. I'm trying to like go through this in my head. I'm like, I feel like every place I've worked, we have tried to support junior developers. We've tried to support everyone, right? And we understand that like investing into people's careers is helpful. And even I'll explain why this is difficult for me because I'm so like against it, like to not support people in their career growth. That what I'm trying to do is think through my head: have I observed at companies I've been at other managers like statistically just being like, we don't really care, like we're just trying to move things along, and I haven't seen it. Like this is why I'm kind of pausing here and like because I'm trying to think about scenarios like that. I think the only time I have seen that kind of stuff is just like managers that were crap and not because it was a like a systematic thing at the organization. Like the organization didn't want investments. It was just like managers that couldn't actually do their jobs effectively. And maybe that's what's happened, right? Maybe the people in leadership positions have never really had that kind of thing. And they don't see the value in it, which is a big missed opportunity, right? I know that personally, and I've shared videos on this before. Personally, when I look at developing and helping people and grow in their careers, like I would go as far as to say that ultimately, I want to help people progress in their careers to the point where, like, I fully expect that I will not be able to provide them the opportunity, like, sort of underneath me. right? Like I want people to be able to grow in their career where it no longer makes sense that I manage them, which might sound funny. Ideally, I'm also getting promoted and growing in my career, which, by the way, I mentioned this and I'm going to keep bringing it up periodically, but I have, to this day, I have never been promoted in my 12 and a half years of working after university. I have never once actually formally been promoted. Interesting. But my point is that I want people to be able to grow to the point where the opportunity within the team is kind of limiting them, right? Unless our team is growing and we're all growing with it, which is a great spot to be in. But if that's not happening, then I want to make sure that people are like, hey, like ultimately, I need to go find another team, or I might have to leave the company to go find another opportunity. I would like to be in a position, it's hard, right? It's always hard when people need to leave for growth. And in my career, I've had two. I've had two people leave. Both were relatively junior. One was just like an obnoxious pay raise, and it was like, we talked about it, and it was like, hey, like I understand. They were getting paid. If I'm not mistaken, it was like more than I was getting paid, and I was like, just yeah, like I said, I can go have a conversation to see if we can counter. And they're like, honestly, like it's totally cool. I just wanted to let you know, like, like, okay, I get it. So that's great. Great for them. And that's their choice. That's totally fine. No hard feelings there. And then another person, they were very transparent with me. They were saying like, they said, because I'm so early in my career, I like need to go try other things. I said, I don't want to stay in one spot and then feel like like they're like, it's great here, but it feels like I'm doing myself an injustice. And I get it because I had 6 internships. So I was like, I'm going to go explore. Um, but otherwise, I've had two people tell me like either they have offers or they're considering leaving where they're at, but they want to come work under me. And I've had other people since then that were following up with me going, hey, like, do you have like positions I'd like to come work for you? So my point is that I want to make sure that people can grow. I've had people that have worked under me. Uh, you know, one person's a VP at a startup. I have two other guys that are directors where I used to work. So they exceeded the position I had and currently have, and they're doing amazing. So that's my goal, right? Like my goal as a manager is to be able to support people. My next goal as a manager is to support other managers because I've been doing it for a long time now. Like that's the next progression for me. So for this person, it's hard for me to understand why a company would not want to do that. But ultimately, if they're not investing, again, that's a red flag. This just ties back to my, the previous point. It's like, I think if you're not having the conversations about trying to have this type of feedback from your manager, like I wouldn't expect it. And if they're not going to put in the time and effort, and maybe that's a cultural thing within the organization, yeah, it might not be a good spot. And then the next question that was here is like outstaffing companies generally have little to offer growing developers who want to advance. I don't know, unfortunately. I'm trying to even think again if there's anything about like the number of like levels of developers I need to have. Like, again, I'm trying to think, are outstaffing companies trying to treat developers more like just like pure resources on a spreadsheet? And maybe like I would think if they had more senior developers that they could charge more. Like, so wouldn't that be a good thing? They can say, hey, like for this project, you're going to need like more senior developers on it. So like, yes, like that will cost you more. And we have the people to do that. Like, so yeah, it feels kind of weird to me. I don't have a good justification for it. Last question though is, if I want to look for a new job, is it a good idea to aim for a product company or a startup as a junior slash mid full stack developer, or what other options? Um, yeah, honestly, In terms of like a startup or something like that, I think that that's going to be, well, any job is going to be some amount of like risk assessment. I've made lots of videos talking about this. Um, there are recorded live streams on Dev Leader. If you want to check out that channel and go through the live streams, you can kind of poke through. But I've absolutely talked about like weighing out the pros and cons. I think it's kind of like the grass. I titled it like the grass is greener or something. There's code commute videos because the code commute video like gave me the idea for the live stream. So I've talked about this before. Every person's going to be different, right? Your motivation for where you want to go is going to be different. In this person's case, I don't even see compensation coming up, right? So maybe that's part of it. I'm kind of just like scrolling through. I'm sure like, compensation can always be better, sure. But this person's like I'm not growing. They don't have growth opportunities. That's their motivation. So like put that like when you're trying to consider your opportunities, weigh that out. If you're going to start looking at other places, that's a thing you need to go understand when you're interviewing and applying to places. So try to go uncover that, right? Talk to people that work at these companies. If you land the interview and you have questions that you can ask, like ask about how that looks. Do your research on these places because that will need to be, in my opinion, like factored into your decision making process. Like, is why are you going to go to another company if you only heard bad things about how they have like career advancement, or why are you going to go to another company and not try to find that out and just kind of take a risk? Because there's going to be other companies that don't do this either. So if you're going to do it, I would say go answer these questions. I think that's really important. But again, different people will value different things. For some people, they might say like, I'm like pretty comfortable at the level I'm at, but like I just want to get more pay. So like, can I find that? Great, go do that. Or, I like the amount of challenge I have in terms of like tech. I feel like things are uh, work life balance right now is really difficult. And I just want to like see if I can keep my pay the same, maybe even take a step back in pay. I would take a pay cut and I want like a better work life balance. That's not what it sounds like for this person. It sounds like growth opportunities, some challenges. Startups will be filled with challenges. My personal experience was going to a startup after school and doing that for 8 years, not my own, but another person's startup. So, like, I'm not going to advise or prescribe anything. I thought startups were an excellent way to go learn things because you have to go learn so much stuff. You have to. If you're not the kind of person that likes working really hard and, kind of like having little guidance and trying to figure out everything with you and like your colleagues and it's just kind of chaotic, it might not be for you. And that's totally okay. I'm not like, it's not like a gatekeeping thing. I'm not saying, oh, you're not cut out for it. I'm just saying you legitimately may not like it. And that's totally fine because at larger companies, and this isn't like a unique thing, but you might have more opportunity just by volume of people to be around more expertise. Like statistically, there may be more experts per per person or something, just because or I shouldn't say per person, even if it was per person equal. Yeah, that's what I mean to say. If it was per person equal in terms of the amount of expertise, you would have more of those people. There we go. So you increase your surface area to interact with these individuals or have the opportunity to reach out. So maybe that's what you want. So it's hard to answer this, but you can find like that kind of startup vibe at larger companies as well. So if you're going to say interview at Microsoft or Meta or Amazon or Google, you may find that they have like these smaller product teams and they're like, hey, we're just getting started in here. And like that could be a cool opportunity because it might feel like a bit more of a startup vibe, but you have like all of the support from this enormous organization. Also potentially risky with layoffs and stuff because they might say, hey, this thing's a brand new idea and like it's not making money. So if we need to cut costs, which is shitty. I'm not trying to defend it. It's something to think about. So I realize that's maybe not a super helpful answer, but I do think that if you've been doing outstaffing and you've kind of had the customer, which is the person that you're doing the work for, going to a product company would be awesome because you'll have a little, in my opinion, a bit of an advantage for like kind of thinking through how the customer thinks. Right? This is something that a lot of people miss when they're going for their first jobs because they're like, I have never had to do this. I've been doing lead code and school assignments. What's a customer, right? And you can't blame people. They haven't had to do this. For context, at Microsoft, I work on platform teams, and I've been doing that for just under 5 years now. I literally have a hard time compared to like a more product focused team where it's like, hey, users are sending this feedback. Yes, we have users. Yes, we have responsibility to external users, but as a platform team, it's like the other developers internally. And what I have found is that, and I don't mean for this to sound harsh, it's like the unfortunate best way I can describe it. Sometimes it's like a thankless job because like no one comes by and they're like, hey, awesome work, just having things working. Like, you guys are great. It just works. No, they come by when things don't work. So it doesn't feel so good a lot of the time. Whereas you might have end users that are like, and I had this a lot with the forensic experience where we would have people coming in, contacting salespeople, tech support, and being like, I used your product. We help catch bad people, or, basically the opposite, like, allow people that we had evidence, this person uh, was not guilty, and having that kind of impact. And you would be like, I made that feature they used. Like, that's a cool thing. So I really like that kind of experience. And yeah, I do think that if you have some exposure to interacting with other stakeholders that aren't just the developers on your team, that can be a big advantage that you can lean into. So I would think, again, not prescribing anything. If I were in this position, what would I do? I think that if I really liked what I was doing, I would have a conversation with my manager first. Say, hey, like, this is my expectations for being able to try and grow in my career. Like, are we able to have career conversations? Depending on the interest level and how much I want to stay. If I don't see any movement on that, okay, time to start interviewing. Um, and then I would probably look for a small company in an area, like a product area that seems interesting to me. The reason I'm not saying a big company is because I feel like statistically you may have a similar type of problem. Just like statistically, I'm just thinking that like and this is more like anecdotal from hearing people say like, hey, I just work in a place with tons of bureaucracy. Okay, like if we can cut that down, like, do you have more likelihood of having a manager that wants to support you? Perhaps. So something to think about, but I think that's what I would recommend. So I hope for this person that was helpful. I realize it might not be sort of the focus they were hoping for on the outstaffing stuff, but I just don't have a ton of experience with that. So I do want to remind all of you, right? Like, if you're realizing that you're not happy somewhere, try to understand like what it is about where you're working or the type of work or how you're being managed, or what, like, do some of that reflection for yourself. Try to understand that. This thing says it's overheating. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because apparently this camera's overheating. Um, yeah, I hope all of you the best. And if you're kind of struggling going through this stuff, then do some of that reflection. Okay. If you have questions, leave them in the comments or send them to DevLeader on social media. And I'll see you folks next time when my camera is not overheating. Take care.